أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله نستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له عز وجل. وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم. أرسله بالحق بشيرا ونذيرا بين يدي الساعة. من يطع الله ورسوله فقد رشد ومن يأسيهما فإن لا يضر إلا نفسه ولا يضر لها شيئا أما بعد. فقال له تعالى في القرآن الكريم في السورة آل عمران: ولتكن منكم أمة يدعون إلى الخير ويأمرون بالمعروف وينهون عن المنكر وأولئك هم المفلحون. وأيضا هو قال: كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس تأمرون بالمعروف وتنهون عن المنكر وتؤمنون بالله. وصدق الله العظيم. بارك الله لي ولكم في القرآن الكريم ونفعني وإياكم بالذكر الحكيم إنه هو جواد الرؤوف الرحيم. And Hajj Talib. I seek refuge in Allah from Satan, from Shaitan, the accursed devil. In the name of Allah, the merciful, the compassionate, all praise is due to Allah. All gratitude is due to Allah. I seek His help and beg His forgiveness, and we seek refuge in Allah from the mischief and the evils of our soul. Whosoever Allah guides, there is none who can lead that person astray, and whosoever Allah finds in error, there is none to guide them. I bear witness there is no God, no deity existing, and therefore worthy of worship except Almighty Allah. Glory be to Him, who is one alone, unique, without partner or associate. And I bear witness further the Prophet Muhammad ibn Abdullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. May the peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, is Allah's servant, messenger, and apostle. And He, Allah, has sent His messenger in truth and with the truth, as a bearer of glad tidings and also as a warner in advance of the hour of judgment. Therefore, whosoever obeys Allah and His messenger, surely that person is rightly guided, and whosoever disobeys the two of them, surely that person harms only his or her own soul, and they harm not Allah the slightest little bit. As for what follows, for Allah, glory be to Him, has said in the Quran, in two ayat, both of them in Surah Al Imran, the third surah of the Quran. Let there arise from among you a group of people, a nation of people, who should invite to righteousness, enjoin good and forbid evil. Such are the ones who shall be successful. And further, Allah has said, you are the best nation which has ever been raised to the guidance of mankind. You enjoin good, forbid evil, and believe in Allah. And surely Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has spoken the truth. For you who believe, it is critical for us in this day and time. What day is it? What time is it? Today is the first of the Julian month of November. And that means in this year of 2019, there are two months left, this month and next month. And then that year of 2019 of the Common Era, 2019 Miladi, will be over. And we further find ourselves now about a quarter of a way into our Islamic year of 1441 Hijriya, 1441 years since the Hijrah, the flight of the Muslim from Mecca to Medina, and the establishment of the Muslim community under the guidance of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the revelation of the Quran. So as we continue to reflect upon the significance of the prophetic significance of the year of 2019 and the reflections that we have been engaging in over the past few months, the reflections on the prophecy of a Nabi Ibrahim, the Prophet Abraham, alayhi salam, the prophecies of a Nabi Yusuf, the Prophet Joseph, alayhi salam, peace be upon him, and the significance in prophetic time-telling of the past 400 years. It is important that we extend our reflections to include the two verses that we have just heard from the Quran. Because these two verses that we have heard from the Quran, they serve the purpose of informing us as to how Allah brings about the establishment of righteousness in the life of this world on a communal level, and how that communal establishment of righteousness then impacts human society, global society, the society of man. For surely from the earliest times of the prophets and messengers of Allah, may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon them, from the earliest times of that dispensation of revelation, the command of Allah always unfolded or always manifested through community. There was not a prophet from Adam alayhi salam to Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon them all. There was not a time when the revelation sent to a prophet resulted in him extending what had been revealed to him to another person, and then that other person growing to that of a community, a family and a community. When Allah, glory be to him, created a Nabi Adam, peace be upon him, next thing he did was he created Eve. And then the two of them are a family. You know, in the Islamic way of thinking, two is a congregation. When you make salah and you got one other person with you, then that constitutes a jama'ah. And then eventually they had children. And their children were under the guidance of the revelation of Allah. And then every single prophet that you can think of, a Nabi Nuh, the Prophet Noah, alayhi salam, a Nabi Musa, a Nabi Isa, think of a prophet of Allah, a Nabi Ibrahim, peace be upon him, And you always find the revelation sent to an individual extending and resulting in the establishment of communal righteousness. Or you will worship Allah. And this is critically important for us because we're living in a time and in a place of the supremacy of rugged individualism. We're living in a time and in a place where people have a tendency to view their existence only as a solitary being and little concern for humanity and little concern for communal establishment of righteousness, communal struggle. And this is, for instance, in contrast to the understanding that swept the nation decades ago, wherein people weren't just concerned about what's happening with them. They were concerned with the fate of their people. They were concerned with the condition of their people. They were concerned with the struggle of their people. And so, Wa'alimi Sheikh Allama Tawfiq, Rahmatullah alayhi, our founding Imam, he used to say to those of us who were his students, some people say self-preservation is the first law of nature. However, for some people, self-preservation includes the preservation of their brothers and their sisters. They're not only concerned about them as an individual. And so when we hear these two revelations, these two passages from the Quran, these two passages from the Quran are speaking about the communal establishment of righteousness, not the individual, or not confined to the individual establishment of righteousness, but communal, or you worship Allah. And both of the verses that I've just read use the word ummah in their articulation. So when Allah says, "Kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat lin-nas ta'muruna bil ma'ruf wa tanhauna 'anil munkar wa tu'minuna billah." You are the best ummah. You are the best community. You are the best group. You are the best nation which has ever been raised for the guidance of mankind, Allah says. We're enjoying good, you're enjoying good, forbid evil, and believe in Allah. And notice the words that Allah uses. He says, Ummatin ukhrijat lin-nas. Let me stop for a minute. The word ukhrijat is a passive form of the verb kharaja. Kharaja, to leave out of, to emerge. Ukhrijat in this ayah has the sense of extracted. Like you take an orange and you squeeze it and the juice comes out. The juice is extracted from the pulp of that piece of fruit. So the idea that's being conveyed here by Allah is that since mankind came into being, that with each passing generation, there has always been a group of people, an ummah, a nation emerging from out of the larger body. The larger predominant body, their orientation is this, and there's always been a group emerging from them who had a higher thinking, higher behavior, higher principle for which they stood. And furthermore, even before that ayah, that's ayah number 110, so ayah 104, وَأَوْ تَكُونْ مِنْكُمْ أُمَّةٌ, there's that word again, يَدْعُونَ إِلَى الْخَيْرِ وَيَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنكَرِ. Same, very similar language Allah uses and he says, وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ, and they are the ones who will be successful. Successful how? Successful in this world and successful in the hereafter. So I say to you again, brothers and sisters, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not call you to Islam. Now think about yourself. Think about yourself and think about your human efforts to submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then think about all the people you know who don't make that effort, who don't make that struggle, whether they're Muslim or Christian or whatever they may be. Why are you a Muslim? Why Allah pick you? Allah did not pick you and I because He needs us. Allah don't need anybody. Allah picked you and I because He wanted good for us. As He says in His book, when Allah wants good for a person, He opens their heart to Islam. These are the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we're not doing Allah any favor with our fasting and with our prayers and with our attempts to do what is right. Allah is doing us a favor. Allah did us a favor by opening our hearts to His revelation, or you who worship Allah. So it's very important. We have to think about these things. I try to remind you and remind myself of that which we must think of consciously. Because if you don't think of something consciously in this society, then you're going to be overwhelmed by prevailing narratives. If you don't stop and say, well, this is halal and this is haram. This is what Allah has permitted and this is what Allah has forbidden. If you don't consciously stop and engage in that process several times a day, then your mind is going to be flooded with the haram. Your mind is going to be flooded with that which Allah has forbidden. Why? Because that which Allah has forbidden is constantly being normalized in the society in which we live. So you can't go by prevailing narrative. You can't go by, what other people are saying, what other people are doing. You have to go by what Allah has said and what His messenger has said and what the Prophet, peace be upon him, was doing. This is the nature of the life of in this world, the life in which we pursue hasana, the life in which we pursue a good. When you hear, that a bill has been passed, legislative bill has been passed in the state of New York, legalizing marijuana. And you walk down the town, I was in Town Square the other day. I look up, here's a big billboard, half as big as this building, right? Connected to the emergence of the marijuana industry. That don't have nothing to do with you, all right? It hasn't been legalized for you. It's not your concern if you're going to, get the police going to give you a ticket or arrest you. That's not for you. That's not for the nation that Allah has created and inspired and then recruited you into. You're a part of a different nation. You're a part of a different group of people, notwithstanding all of the Muslims who smoke weed. When they smoke weed, then they're stepping outside of what Allah has called them to, and they're doing something else. The fact that you could be a Muslim who operates a business, it might be a grocery store, it might be a restaurant, and the fact that you can go somewhere, pay a fee, and get a license to sell alcohol, and they put your name on the liquor license, Muhammad Abdullah. The fact that you can do that, that doesn't make it permissible. That doesn't make it allowable at the command of Allah, even though man says it's all right. No, it's all right. Just pay your fee right here, sign your name on the dotted line, here's your license. So you can't go by prevailing narrative. just because we live in a society in which now here's the new emerging narrative to line up behind all the other narratives. Now they're talking about a third gender. You know, a third gender, and they're saying as kind of a subtle psychological put down, they're talking about, oh, you into that binary expression. They have to listen. I listen all the time. Binary expression. Man, Allah created the universe through binary expression. Allah said He created mankind from a male and a female. Allah said He created all creatures in pairs. And now man, in the abstract thinking of his gross disobedience to Allah, he want to try to come up with a way to explain, no, this is, y'all into that binary expression, but me, and they got all kind of words now. The word used to just be sexual intercourse. They talk about pan, this, comprehensive, that. All of it is talk about sex. But just because there's a narrative that doesn't make it the truth, and that doesn't make it relevant to you, that might make it relevant to somebody else, but that is not the nation, that is not the group, that is not the ummah that you and I have been called to, or you who worship Allah. So remember these things, dear brothers and sisters, and thank Allah, and I know you do. I know how grateful you are to be Muslim, because I know how grateful I am to be Muslim. I know how grateful you are when you can think back on the days of your jahiliyyah. You can think back on the days of your ignorance, and you say, man, I remember I used to be so-and-so, so-and-so, so-and-so. And when I became Muslim, the whole community was glad, because I used to spend my time terrorizing the community. I used to spend my time exploiting the community. And you will become Muslim, and everybody, even the Muslims, are saying takbir. Because they're grateful for what Allah has blessed us with. So here's the danger. Here's the danger. We live in a time and in a place of tremendous seduction. We live in a time and a place where there are Muslims born and raised in this society. Muslims been here 400 years or more. Muslims, and you know who you are, and you should know who they are. If I talk about Muslims that have been in America 400 and 500 years, I'm only talking about one group in the Ummah, those of us who are of African descent. Nobody else been here that long. Everybody else, you can pick up a calendar and mark when they started coming here. You can't pick up a calendar and mark when you started coming here. So those of us who've been born and raised in this society and been in this society for generations, and who are not immigrants to this society, we've been engaged in a struggle since we first got here. Been engaged in a struggle to establish the way of life of La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. As I said a few weeks ago, when I was giving the khutbah and I spoke about Muhammad Wayanomu, right? So, and some of you have learned that since I put that lesson out there. Muhammad Wayanomu, a Native American, so-called original American, Mohegan Indian chief, they call him a sachem, whose grave marker is in the Native American burial ground in Norwich, Connecticut, as of the year 1735. You go to his grave marker, it says, Muhammad, 1735. Now, America didn't come into existence until 1776. And then Muhammad Wayanomu, and people always say to me, man, why do you always reference history? Number one, I reference it because you don't know it. And so if you don't have an accurate historical narrative that's part of your thinking, that means that you've absorbed somebody else's historical narrative. So if you don't know that there was a Native American, so-called American Indian, named Muhammad Wayanomu, who has a grave marker in a Native American cemetery in Connecticut. If you don't know that, then you won't know that just a matter of about 13 years ago, they had a big ceremony in England. Wasn't covered here, it was on BBC. They didn't cover it on CNN. But they had a big ceremony in London, in England, wherein the Queen of England received a delegation of Native Americans who were Mohegans, and they presented to her a copy of the petition that their ancestor, Muhammad Wayanomu, had wanted to present to King George had he not died. Had he not died. So the other day, I'm reviewing the history, and I was able to pull up the transcript of the original petition that Muhammad Wayanomu took to King George II. So I'm reading the text, and he says, Muhammad Wayanomu, in the year 1735, he talks about his great-grandfather, Uncas, and he mentions his father. He said, this Muhammad, and my father was named Muhammad. So now look at that. So how is it in 1735, here's a so-called Native American Indian named Muhammad, and his father's named Muhammad. But that's not what's really profound. What's really profound is you have to ask the question, well, if there was a Native American leader in 1735 and his name was Muhammad, and his father's name was Muhammad, the real question is, who gave them dawah? That's the question. The question is, who brought them the call of Islam, and how far back was that? Oh, you who worship Allah. And it's important to reflect upon this thing, because then it'll expand your thinking. It'll expand your mind. Particularly when you start trying to answer that question, and the only answer that you can come up with, oh, you Muslims of the universal ummah, who are African people, the only answer you could come up with was somebody look like you. But they were the only ones who were here. Somebody look like you engaged in an effort to establish dawah, and here we are, all these centuries later, talking about Muhammad Wayanomu. Oh, you worship Allah. Why is that important? Because you should understand that you have been inspired to be a member of an ummah, and just as our ancestors of the past had communal obligations, you and I have communal obligations. You should understand that the call to Islam that has touched your heart as an individual is not meant just to benefit you as an individual. You are meant to be part of a group, part of an ummah. Here's another analogy from nature, from Mu'alimi Shaykh Adama Tawfiq Rahmatullah. So I remember him saying, he said, fish swim, but they don't all swim at the same depth in the ocean, and they don't all swim at the same speed, he said. Birds fly, but they don't all fly at the same height. Some of them down close to the ground, some of them are way up high, you know, like the falcons. I was watching a nature show the other day. It said New York State is full of falcons, which is amazing. And I never really thought about it until I started watching this little documentary. And in the documentary they said that falcons love New York because of all the tall buildings here, very high. They can swoop down in canyons. And then I remembered that there are falcons that fly through this neighborhood every now and then. One day we were here in Jumah. We finished praying the Salat to Jumah. We walked right outside. A falcon had grabbed a pigeon and tore him to bits, and the falcon was right on top of a car parked right across the street. Another time we were walking down the street right here in Harlem, a falcon in Harlem. We walking through right up the block here. All of a sudden, a rat runs out. That doesn't surprise anyone. But then a falcon swept down, grabbed the rat, and flew away with it. I mean, these are things you see in this neighborhood. You don't have to watch National Geographic. All you have to do is look out the window. And you'll see miraculous things. So Sheikh Alama, he said that birds swim but not at the same depths and not at the same speed. He said that birds fly but not at the same altitude and not at the same speed. The Sheikh Alama said, and he said, and that's the same with human beings. Human beings think, but we don't all think at the same speed. We don't all think or ponder or reflect at the same depth of thinking. You talk to some brothers, you listen to conversations walking down the street. You hear some people, the extent of their profound thinking is whoever won the game last night. That's as deep as their conversation is going to get, male or female. Or what's the latest song out? That's as profound as they're thinking. Then you have other people who are trying to figure out, man, how do we improve the condition of our people? Or how do we improve the condition of the world? You have people who actually sit down and reflect upon those things. And then as the completion of the lesson, Sheikh Allama Al Hajj K. Ahmed Tawfiq Rahmatullah Alayhi, he said to us that there are sounds that go out in nature that some creatures can hear and other creatures can't. And we know this from the phenomena of the dog whistle. You can blow a dog whistle, other people can't hear it. But dogs can definitely hear it. Bats emanate a type of, sonar, where they emit high-pitched sound waves that bounce off of objects and help them to maneuver their way through an environment. Allah has made the creation, and an aspect of the creation is that some of the creatures emit sounds that other creatures cannot hear. And then the Sheikh Alama, he said, so it is with the call to Islam. That there is a call to Islam that does, has, and will go out to all of humanity, but only certain people hear it. Only certain people's hearts are affected by it. Some people hear the call to Islam and run away. Some people hear the call to Islam and run toward it. And this is part of the nature of the universe. You and I, Allah wanted good for us, so He opened our hearts to Islam. So when that call, La ilaha illallah, that went out, all of a sudden it touches our hearts. I've had people who are not Muslim, people who are Christian, people who are Jews, who have stopped me and told me, yeah, I used to live and then named some Muslim country, and they said to me, yeah, you know, I'm not Muslim, but I love to hear that call to prayer early in the morning. They said it does something to my heart. It affects my heart. So if you can grasp that, if you can understand that, if you'll reflect upon that, then you know that you being a Muslim is not a coincidence. You being a Muslim is not a coincidence. And you being a Muslim opens the door for other people in your family being a Muslim, whether you live to see it or not. Here's another example. Last week I was giving a khutbah and I was warning you about the coming of Halloween. I warned you, and you saw it manifested yesterday. And I said to you that Halloween is based on lies of the power of the shaitan. all that stuff, demons, ghosts, goblins, rising from the dead, all that kind of stuff, man, it's a lie. Shaitan don't have that kind of power. Shaitan's power is influence, psycho-spiritual influence over the crown of creation. So Allah doesn't have the power, Shaitan does not have the power to destroy us. He has the power to whisper to cause us to destroy yourself. Amen, hang it up. Amen, take this. I can't make you take it. And when Allah asks me, I'm going to be sure to tell him, I didn't make him do that, man. He did that, she did that. And oh my God. 2 days ago, someone sent me a video. I'm going to spread it around. 2 days ago, somebody sent me a video of a public forum being held by young people who are Muslims in Minnesota. In Minnesota, they have a very large Somali Muslim community there. So these young people, young men and women, they were having a public forum about the scourge of narcotics use in their community. And it was really being led by young women who had been addicted. This is not heroin addiction back in the day. They're addicted to everything else. And they were crying and they were talking about, as Muslims, how they wasted so much of their lives getting high. And how they've gotten high with other young men who are Muslims. Now, here are young people whose parents were born and raised in Muslim society. And they make the decision to leave whatever Muslim society they were born and raised in and to come to America. And they have children here, and then their children become overwhelmed by the prevailing narrative and the prevailing culture. And so, and the young lady was talking, she was talking about the young Muslims who are smoking weed, who are using crack, who are dropping pills, who run away from home, and all of these sorts of narratives that when we in the Muslim community listen to them, we tend to think, oh yeah, those are non-Muslims being affected. No, it ain't just them. And when I looked at this documentary, which affected my heart, I started thinking about all the young people who I know. Young people right here in Harlem, who you go down certain blocks, you know what I mean, and they're out. I remember one morning I was going to Friday. A Muslim cab driver brought me here. He was continental African. He pointed, he said, you see them young people on the corner there? You know, it's about 5 in the morning. I said, yeah. He said, yeah, man, they're selling drugs, man. I know their parents. Their parents come from so-and-so, so-and-so. And before any of you make the mistake of thinking that this psychic attack from Shaitan only affects one ethnic group, you better think again. Because don't forget now, I'm retired now. I've been retired about a year and a half from a 40-year career of service working in the jails and prisons of New York. So about my last 10 years of that work, this is what I started seeing. I started seeing locked up in the jail and locked up in the prison young people who were sons and daughters of Muslims from Africa, Muslims from Pakistan, Muslims from the Arab countries, to the point that when Ramadan comes, before I used to be trying to lead Tawee here, lead Tawee down in the jail, then run uptown. My last few years, I could just turn to those who were incarcerated. And I say to them, how many of you know how to recite the Quran? A couple of hands go up. I say, how much of the Quran do you know? 1 juice, 2 juices, 3 juices. What are you doing on Rikers Island? What are you doing in jail? Well, credit card fraud. What are you doing in prison? Selling drugs. What are you doing in prison? I got arrested selling my body out on the street. So it's critically important. We have to know what lifestyle Allah has called us to, what beliefs, and what obligation Allah has called us to. You want to have these Muslim children? I don't care whether you were raised here or your parents were raised here or raised in some other part of the world. There are obligations that must be fulfilled to these young people. You can't just, make them and then set them loose in the society. You're going to have to sacrifice. You have to sacrifice to build a school for them. You have to sacrifice to build a community center for them, so that they can be around other Muslims, and not get caught up in the mix. You have to put aside the world of fun and good times and do what other parents have done, which is the sacrifice for the sake of your children, but not only for their sake, but for the sake of the life of this world. I said to you before, 13% of public school children in New York City are Muslim. That's about 130,000 Muslim children in an environment where they're having Halloween parties, in an environment where they're being exposed to children's level books about the validity of LGBTQ lifestyle and the third gender and all of that kind of stuff. A minimum of 130,000 Muslim boys and girls being exposed to that stuff. And that's not to mention the Muslims who have their children in Catholic school, because they want a good education for their child, so they're putting their children in Catholic school. Listen, there are people who understand the importance of education for their children to such a degree that they get locked up right now for trying to get their child a higher education by any means necessary. They said, man, I'm going to bribe somebody, I'm going to do something. They're locking people up right now. I haven't seen any of them look like you and I, but they're getting locked up. But what did that show? That showed that they were willing to do whatever they had to do, because they did not want their child being uneducated in a society and in a day and time like this. But for you and I, the education must not only be so-called secular education, it must be religious education. It must be spiritual education. And so once the companions of the Messenger of Allah, may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon them, they went to the Prophet, peace be upon him, they said, Ya Rasulullah, what does Allah mean when He says in the Quran, O you who believe, save yourselves and your families from the fire whose fuel is men and stone. It's an ayah in the Quran. It's in Surah 66. They said, what does that mean? The Prophet said, you save them by teaching them. He said, that which leads to Jannah, that which leads to paradise, and that which leads to hell, and how to pursue one and avoid the other. So the secular education is good, is necessary, but it's not enough. You have to make sure that your child is in a position to learn from you or to learn from someone else that which leads to paradise. And that we are all parts of an ummah, a community of believers. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم اللهم بارك وسلم على سيدنا ومولانا محمد عليه السلام والسلام وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. For dear believers, we conclude the khutbah with a reminder from Allah's Messenger, peace be upon him, who on the authority of Ibn Amr radiallahu anhu, may Allah's favor be upon him, said that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, أفضل المهاجرين من هجر ما نهى الله تعالى عنه وأفضل الجهاد من جاهد نفسه في ذات الله عز وجل وصدق النبي الكريم. اللهم اغفر لنا مسلمين ومسلمات ومؤمنين ومؤمنات والمحسنين والمحسنات وبعد. For the Prophet Muhammad, may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, is reported in authenticated hadith, authenticated narration, narrated by Ibn Amr. May Allah's favor be upon him. The Prophet said, the best migrant is the one who migrates from what Allah has prohibited. And the best jihad is that of one who strives against his own desires for the sake of Allah, most great and glorious God. For you will worship Allah. That's all what it is. We live in a society in which the migrants and immigration and other similar social phenomena is constantly in the public ear. You hear it every day. They say this is a nation. You know, when I say they, I mean they. They say this is a nation of immigrants, they say, as the sons and daughters of immigrants. Not to mention the fact that there's a president in office now who's the son of immigrants who's destroying the country. Not to mention the fact that his mouthpiece, his consigliere, is another son of immigrants who used to be the mayor of New York City. And together they've gotten together, you know, in an unholy, I want to call it an unholy trinity, but I can't think of a third person to you know, put in that group. Because every time they get a third person, that person ends up in jail. You know, you've never seen a presidential administration where everybody's going to jail. We've seen administrations where they lock up a few people. You know, some of us were around, some of y'all kind of young, but some of us were young when Watergate was the news, and they locked up a few of those guys. And now, I mean, you got a whole administration, they're going to jail, and mark my word. Tell you something about Rudolph Giuliani. Remember Imam Talib said that. So I said that I used to work in jails and prisons, right? So I used to work right downtown, 125 White Street, and what they call the Tombs. So they used to call the Tombs the Manhattan House of Detention, right? So then when Rudolph Giuliani became the mayor, he appointed his boy, Bernard Kerik, as the police commissioner. So one day I come to work, and there's a new sign up. They've changed the name of the jail from Manhattan Detention Center to Bernard B. Kerik Center. This is one day, and I'm looking. Then Bernard Kerik got in all that trouble, went to jail himself, and I came back, and the old sign was back up. And I asked the guards who work in the jail, I said, man, when they do that? They said, man, some guys came in the middle of the night and took down the sign, and they went and got that other sign out of some mothballs. You know, now it's back up. You know, that's because what goes around comes around, man. It's a principle of the universe. And, you know, fool around, keep watching Giuliani, because he might end up locked up in protective custody somewhere. Sons of immigrants who a couple of 100 years ago stormed through the streets of New York. Around time in 1863, I think it was. The sons of European immigrants stormed through the streets of New York, hanging black people, burning down orphanages for black children to the ground. Why? Because Abraham Lincoln told them, man, y'all gonna have to be subject to the draft and help us fight this Civil War. You need to study American history. It's called the Great Draft Right of 1863. Why do I mention it? I mention it because, again, immigrants and immigration. But you and I, part of this religious and spiritual nation that Allah has called us to, Allah said the best immigrant, the best migrant is the one who migrates away from the haram, migrates away from what Allah has prohibited. They use the word naha, which means prohibit. And the best jihad is that of the one who makes jihad, who struggles against his own desires for the sake of Allah. Again, you hear that word in the narrative all the time, jihad this, jihad that. And as our incarcerated political prisoner, brother and leader Imam Abdur-Rashid, may Allah preserve him. As he always said, man, how you going to wage war on evildoers and you can't even wage war on the evil of your own soul? You talking about, yeah, man, we need to make jihad, and then jihad, and then jihad, and you don't even get up for Fajr. Stop fronting, man. Stop pretending. The first level, the deepest level, the most profound level of jihad is to wage war against the shaitan, against Satan and his effect on your heart. Not the heart of the person next to you, on your heart. What does shaitan whisper to you? What does shaitan encourage you to do? What is it that as soon as you hear that whisper from shaitan, you're supposed to turn around and try and punch shaitan in the mouth, man? Get out of my heart, get out of my ear. Because what you are encouraging me to is only going to lead me to the opposite of what Allah told me to pray for. What did Allah tell us to pray for? Allah told us to pray for hasana fit dunya and hasana fil akhirah. We're told in the Quran to pray for good in this world and good in the hereafter, and the shaitan encourages us to the opposite of that. So may Allah protect us. May Allah bless us with an awareness and a commitment to the fact that we have been called to an emerging nation of faith that Allah has placed an obligation on as a community. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us to be dedicated and committed to our charge from our Creator. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Ameen wa alqa.